When it comes to competitive shooter games, map design is an important thing to get right, since it's a big factor in how fun your game is to play. So with that being said, how well do Splatoon 3's maps hold up? Horribly! But what went wrong here? Well, in order to answer that question, we need to take a look at the way that maps were designed in the previous Splatoon games and then analyze the maps we have now and then compare the design philosophies. So let's start at the beginning. I'm not too concerned with Splatoon 1, since this was the development team's first attempt at making anything quite like this, so they kinda just threw shit at the wall to see what stuck. We got some really awful maps at launch, but we were also new to this whole thing too, so we just didn't really know any better. We just accepted it and moved on with our lives. Eventually, the developers hit their stride and made some maps that I would say are beloved by the majority of the Splatoon community, like the Urchin Underpass redesign, Flounder Heights, Museum, Mahi, and Anchovy games. Each stage in the game felt distinct from one another, whether it be due to layouts or a fun gimmick they threw to the stage, like conveyor belts, or propeller platforms, or the water dropping, and the good maps had different ways to get all over the stage, which emphasized exploration and maneuverability. Fun was at the forefront here when it came to these maps. With Splatoon 2, the developers wanted to make things a bit more competitive, since the first game kind of blew up in Japan and had a whole esports scene going around it. So, they wanted to streamline the maps to make them more competitive and force more encounters and fights in mid. You can see how they accomplished this goal when you look at the way the sides of these maps are designed. Typically, you don't have a lot of room on the sides to do any kind of actual fighting. Look at how small or narrow these side areas are. This makes it so you have to focus your resources and attention towards mid, since it's even more of a relevant space than it already is. These areas serve their purpose as a way around mid or another path into it, but that's all they really are. Even the maps with larger side areas just lead into mid, which again, forces you to fight the enemies in there. I would say the maps in Splatoon 2 are very middle of the pack. The best maps never reached the highs of Splatoon 1, except for the Reef. I love this map so much. And the worst maps didn't reach the lows of Splatoon 1 either, unless they were the lows of Splatoon 1. Seriously, how did all the bad maps from 1 end up in this game? There also aren't really any unique gimmicks to these stages. The most we got were the turning platform surgeon or the stupid Wahoo bridge that removes the best route into mid for half the match. We did get unique gimmicks in the shifty stations though, but these were only playable for a day or two, and they had varying degrees of quality, and honestly some of these could pass as Splatoon 3 maps, but you'll find out why soon enough. Either way, like I said, that is generally how Splatoon 2 maps are designed. In most cases, the maps funnel you into mid to fight there, but you had a handful of routes to go into mid from a few different angles, and some maps let you go around mid altogether. And then there's Splatoon 3. Man, we complained about how bad the maps in 2 were, but we had no idea that things were about to get so much worse. But could we really blame ourselves for not knowing? Things were looking good when we first saw Scorch Gorge in that initial reveal trailer. This Reddit user made a map of the old design of Scorch Gorge, and just look at how big the sides were. We'll get to how this map was butchered later. Eeltail Alley is when the Splatoon 3 design philosophy started to rear its ugly head, but it wasn't as bad yet. Here's my recreation of what Eeltail used to look like after staring at the trailer for around 2 hours. Some of the proportions are a bit off, but what's important is that the general layout is there. The problem here is that there aren't really any side areas. From spawn, there's only one direction you can enter mid. Forward. This is a problem because if you have a vantage point that spans the entirety of mid, a long-range weapon like a charger can just sit there and cover every option of going into the center of the stage. And God forbid they get to your end of the bridge where they can cover every route out of spawn. Thankfully, the designer tried to get around this problem by widening mid and giving you cover in spawn. You can use the walls as cover in the center and go around them by hugging the outside of mid, and your spawn is actual defensive positions, which lets you deal with long-range weapons with your own long-range weapons. If there's more cover in mid, I think this map would have been alright. But apparently, the new people they hired to do map design were actually all Charger mains who decided they suffered enough from Splatoon 2 and wanted to make everyone else suffer instead. So they said, fuck you all, I'm gonna remove all the side routes and just cut them out, funneling everyone into mid even more than the Splatoon 2 maps did, while also giving Chargers all the silence in the world. Or at least that's what I think what happened anyway. Seriously, the new maps we did end up getting in Splatoon 3 feel like neutered versions of Splatoon 2 maps. What happened to Scorch Gorge is a tragedy unlike anything we have ever seen. Well, besides that, we'll get to that! See, with the old version of Scorch Gorge, this section of your spawn was actually a drop onto the low side area down here, which gives you a flank route that's not in Charger's sightlines like the one on Inkblot. In addition, the side areas are just bigger in this version of the map. You even have this part jutting out from your spawn, which lets you drop onto your other side area more easily, and it's even paintable, which lets you go around mid and flank if you want to, or have an option back to your side of the map, so drops into mid aren't so committal like they are right now. If you remove this ramp and spawn so the enemy can't access it and just expand the spawn region, this would have been an excellent map, allowing you many options for traversing the map and letting you run everywhere. Or at least just being a better version of Inkblot. Now, if you try to drop onto the sides, you basically just get shot for even trying to go there in the first place, and that wall doesn't exist anymore. Our charger on the center tower is very oppressive, and the map is basically just now a worse Inkblot fused with Kelp Dome. Which begs the question of why they brought back Inkblot into this game, but I'm not complaining. They could have brought over a worse map into this game like Gobi Arena. Please don't do that. And you might say, well, surely the map is better on Tower Control and Rainmaker, where the center tower is lower down. Well, those must have their own set of problems. Tower Control is garbage because you have to drop into a death pit and climb back up to the tower with only one defensive position available in your spawn. And Rainmaker really only has one route because the Great Path is a death sentence unless the enemy team is wiped. So your only option is to go through a choke point. And while we're talking about Scorch Gorge's ranked modes, Splat Zones! Why? Remember how bad Kelp Dome Zones was? Remember how the zone was so big it was nearly impossible to cap, especially due to the stupid giant structure sitting in it? So whoever got the zone first usually just won? Yeah, this is basically the same thing, except it's worse. At least Kelp Dome gave you a route back into your spawn that won't get you killed, and another approach option that's not from the same general direction. You don't have that here, and the funny part is that this problem wouldn't exist if they just used the old design. Moving on to another map with an absurdly large splat zone, Eeltail Alley. I've already gone over what the old version looks like, and comparing it to what we got, this is basically a different map except in mid, where they brought in the walls to make it more cramped, and now you can't go around these walls like how you'd be able to in the old version. They added more cover to the bridge though, as well as in mid thanks to these blocks, which is nice, I guess. Spawn is completely different, and not in a good way. The old version had all of this the enemy couldn't access with multiple vantage points and cover. What we ended up getting is this massive downgrade with no good defensive positions. If you want to get to the left of your side of the bridge, you have to drop down and then climb back up because they moved the house. And speaking of the house, you can't use it as cover anymore, so you have to expose yourself to shoot at the bridge. There's also this stupid uninkable part they added here, so if you want to move into that area, you can either drop from the house or go up the ramp, where you're at a positional disadvantage. And the enemy can just shark down there to catch drops from the house. Remember what I said about chargers covering every route out of spawn? Yeah, that basically happens here. This map puts way too much of an emphasis on lockouts and spawn camping, and it's just very sad to see, when the old version looked like it didn't have those issues in the first place. Speaking of the old version, the zone's layout most resembles it, so you can go around the walls in mid, and this barrier thing is here that they removed from the old version, but like I said, they made the zone the size of Texas, and the spawn still sucks, so I just hate this. Speaking of maps I hate, Mincemeat Metalworks is probably the worst map we have of the 5 new ones. Honestly, this might just be the worst map in the whole series. At least Salt Spray was funny bad, Mincemeat is just unbearable. Imagine Muscle Forge Fitness, which is already a bad map, with the side areas blocked off so you can't go around mid. And speaking of mid, they sawed it in half and removed all the cover. No blocks, no bumpers, you got nothing. Muscle Forge at least has some blocks in mid for you to hide behind, and well, a whole trench that chargers can't really shoot into. Once again, all the traffic from spawn to mid flows straight forward like Eeltail, except this time, chargers have all the sightlines in the world to shoot into the routes to mid. Here, if the enemy team has a good charger, you basically hunker down on your side of the map until someone gets a displacement special. If there was a charger on this perch in Muscle Forge, you could easily pressure them with bombs and in some cases just shoot them outright. In Mincemeat, the distance from this perch to the nearest high ground is a lot farther, and a charger could easily shoot you, especially since there's no cover on there. In Muscle Forge, there's a slight raise here to give you a bit of cover if you press it right against it, and Mincemeat gives you a truck. The map is a little bit better on modes with a moving objective like Tower Control or Rainmaker, but those still suck because Rainmaker only has one push option, and tower control just removes access onto the enemy's plat, so you have to jump from the tower onto there instead. It has a bumper in mid though. Why can't this be here for all the modes? And then Mincemeat Clams, just watch the Nintendo tournament and you'll see the problem with the map pretty quickly. On the other hand, Undertow Spillway is good on tower control and Rainmaker. Kind of. I mean, I don't hate it, but the map itself is not very good. The problem with Undertow Spillway, well, there are many, but for one thing, the mid is dog shit because of this stupid wall that makes it so cramped. At least the wall gives cover. And again, you are bottlenecked from going forward from your spawn into mid. The Splatoon 2 equivalent to this stage would be Snapper Canal, which gave you an extra option for approaching mid thanks to this jump flank onto the enemy snipe, which also let you go around mid if you wanted to. If you want to approach a sniper in Undertow, you have to go to the narrow mid to get to their perch from behind, which they can easily see coming. Oh yeah, and if the glass is there, you have to approach from the enemy's trench, since the charger can just shoot into your side. And if you go into the enemy's trench, well, that's kind of where the enemies are going to be, so they're just gonna clog it up with bombs so you can't move forward. I don't like the glass, it's really janky for some reason. Throwing bombs up there is really awkward, snipers can use it as cover thanks to the slant, and it makes it really easy for them to just shoot into your side of the map. And I haven't even talked about a charger standing in mid. How do you approach this? You can try to attack from the glass, or maybe pop a special, but you know what would be even better? Flank routes! If this map had a flank like Snapper Canal, it would be half decent. If mid was widened so a bomb can't block the whole lane and to accommodate for how much space the wall takes up, it would be pretty good. Stepping up the quality further, Hagglefish is the only new stage in the game that I would consider good. Because, you won't believe this, it has actual side routes. If I were to compare this to a Splatoon 2 map, it would be Starfish main stage, so let's compare the two. More specifically, the side routes and the main charger perch. And for once, overall, I would say this map is an upgrade from Splatoon 2 counterpart. Starting with the sides, the Starfish side routes are interesting but executed poorly. There's two layers to the sides, the top and the bottom. The top is slower because it's on grates, but it's harder to detect since there's no paint being put down. The bottom path is faster since you can swim, but you have to jump across a gap and people can spot it on the map. You also have the option of going onto this little area up here. The killer here is that the sides are narrow and cramped, which completely ruins the execution and doesn't make them particularly good. As for Hagglefish, you just get a paintable route, but the side paths are so much wider, which is just excellent. The only thing I don't like about the Hagglefish sides is the path you have to take to actually flank. Taking the left path out of spawn lets you go around mid completely, but this sniper perch has a free sightline onto it. If you take the right path out of spawn, you have to swim back up the ramp and then jump across a gap to land on the edge of mid, which, wouldn't you know it, is also in charger sightlines. I appreciate that the flanks are there, but the sniper perch and the path you have to take makes them weaker in practice. But it's still better than the narrow Starfish sides. The tower control layout on Hagglefish does this much better, where you just swim right up in there instead of doing the whole swim back and jump across the gap thing. In addition, if you hug the walls of mid, you have cover from charger sightlines, which is very good. On the other hand, Starfish slightly edges ahead of Hagglefish when it comes to the sniper perch, since you can paint the side of it and get up there to attack, rather than having to approach from behind, which takes too long. Hagglefish has this on clamblets though, which is nice. And yes, while you can pressure with bombs, and it's even uninkable, so it's hard to get away from the bombs, you can actually use the perch itself to shield yourself from the bomb splash damage, which is really stupid. Speaking of the perch being uninkable, I feel like this was a very good change because they probably wanted to prevent this from happening again. I wish I could end on this high note, but we're not done yet. We still have two more stages to cover from Splatoon 1 that are basically different maps. So I would treat them as new maps for the purposes of this video. Let's start with the least offensive of the two, Hammerhead Bridge, aka Walleye 2.0. And I can't believe I'm going to say this, but Walleye Warehouse is the better map. Yeah, I'm going there, and that should really speak a lot about the quality of Splatoon 3's Mahi if I said a worse Walleye is the better map between the two. Walleye at least had paths from your spawn into the side areas. The paths suck because they're so narrow, but it at least had them. And by using those paths, you can even go around mid completely. The spawn of walleye is hilariously bad, but you had some semblance of options. With Hammerhead, you... The only place you can go on Hammerhead is straight forward into this general area. And if the enemy pushes into this area, and they will because the objective has to move forward in Tower Control and Rainmaker, Clamblitz puts the basket here, and you want to move forward in splat zones after capping it to deny the enemy access to the zone, well, good luck getting out of spawn! Oh yeah, and speaking of the enemies pushing in, Walleye and the original Hammerhead slowed the enemy's advance into your spawn by making them walk up these uninkable platforms, which makes them vulnerable. With the new Hammerhead, you can just swim right up into their business. Now, I've never played on the original Hammerhead before, but looking at the map, I can see that you have options out of your spawn into the sides. You know, like Walleye. Honestly, Splatoon 1 Hammerhead just looks like a better Walleye. The lore reason of Hammerhead being completed in the 7 years between Splatoon 1 and Splatoon 3 is interesting, but did they really have to make the map worse than its Splatoon 1 counterpart? Speaking of maps worse than their Splatoon 1 iterations, Mahi! Oh, Mahi. What did they do to Mahi? Comparing the two maps, you can kind of see the remnants of old Mahi, and the middle of the stage is very similar to how it used to be. Some of the changes, I would argue, are even positive. For example, they made this wall the snipers sit on shorter, so weapons like rollers or sloshers have an easier time attacking from below. They moved these blocks close to the towers and raised them so you can jump onto the towers from the blocks. The grates on the edges of mid are now solid uninkables, although they're sadly not bounce pads like how everyone thought they would be. And finally, they also filled in the trench that divided mid a little bit. Sadly, this is where the positives end. One of the big complaints of the original Mahi was that the spawn area sucked. It was too narrow and it was prone to spawn camping, especially with how much range E-Liter had in that game. So to fix this, Nintendo decided to make the spawn area in 3 even worse? At least the old spawn area had cover, the shield, and the island route. Now all you have is... The sniper wall, which originally spanned the length of mid, was shortened, leaving a giant space for the enemy just walking to your spawn. You know, just in case the new spawn areas didn't make spawn camping bad enough. In Splatoon 1, they had to go around the wall and up the corridor into your spawn, or take the islands. Oh yeah, speaking of the islands, they were awesome in Splatoon 1. With the islands, you can go around mid from your spawn. And there's even these floaties which obstructed the view of chargers. You can still hit the shot, but it wasn't free. And when the water level drops, it just completely blocks their sightlines. Apparently, the developers forgot about the point of that, because if you try to jump around the islands now, yeah, you just get shot. What even is the point of this floaty anyway? What sightline are they trying to block with this? The islands themselves aren't even that useful, so they just lead into mid. And in order to get to mid, you have to jump onto a tiny block, which leaves you very vulnerable. Splatoon 1 just had mid extend out to meet the island, which was way better. Mahi had a bunch of paths you could take, and now there's hardly any. You have the islands, which sucks as I established, and they're not even a route you can take in ranked aside from splat zones and maybe tower control, even though that's a very, very tight jump. So why do they even exist at that point? Your only real route into mid is to push from the left of your sniper wall, or in some modes, go down the ramp on the right side. But the enemy snipers can just cover both routes out of mid incredibly easily. Oh yeah, speaking of those other ranked modes, they have different layouts from the turf and zone layouts, which those two are actually kind of similar and, you know, resemble Mahi. In Rainmaker and Clamblitz, you get a flat empty space with these two tiny blocks for cover. And I guess the Rainmaker shield. A long-range weapon can just cover the entirety of mid. Tower control offers a bit more cover, but why is there a stupid water trench here? Did the developers seriously think that mid was big enough to fit this here without making it extra awkward to play? And still, what sightline are they trying to block with this wall? Now, of course, you can't talk about Mahi without also discussing its main gimmick, which is the water level dropping. And when that happens here, the stage at least becomes playable? You now have actual space to work with in mid, which also has more cover, and the islands are also now a better route you can take, although they're still largely irrelevant. This does not save the stage though. If the whole gimmick is that it's a dumpster fire until halfway through the match or until a certain amount of points has been scored and ranked, then it's not really a good map. Also, the gimmick doesn't even fix the spawn. It's still terrible. Terrible, 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 like most of the maps in this game. Ugh. So that is how Splatoon 3's maps are designed. No side areas, limited routes into mid that come from the same direction, and mid itself is a choke point that you must go through. What a load of garbage. Now throughout this video, I've been talking about Charger's sightlines and how ridiculous some of these perches are, but I want to make something clear. I don't hate maps that favor long-range weapons. I don't hate maps with good sniper perches. I don't hate Chargers either, and I respect the time and dedication it takes to get good at these weapons, unlike some people on Twitter apparently. But there comes a point where you have to ask yourself, is this fun? Is it fun when matches devolve into sub and special spam because the E-leader is controlling the entirety of mid by standing in one spot? As the E-leader player, is it fun fighting all these specials aimed at you? As a spectator, is it fun watching a Splatoon tournament and seeing double Splash-O-Matic for the billionth time? Is this fun for anyone involved? Nintendo knows special spam isn't fun. It's a playstyle they have said they are trying to reduce in their patch notes. If they want to fix this problem, the solution is simple. Just have multiple good routes on your maps, so you don't depend on specials to move the enemy. You might have noticed that I brought up double Splash-O-Matic. You didn't think I forgot about the crab tank, did you? Any complaint I made about Chargers also applies to this stupid thing, which can easily shut down a route into mid for 9 whole seconds thanks to its long range and kill power, while also being able to hit behind cover. Going back to the is this fun question, is it fun when you can't play the game for 9 whole seconds? And that's just one crab. It's not uncommon to find multiple crabs in your solo queue games, which can add up to 18 or 27 whole seconds. But with that being said, is there still hope for Splatoon 3's maps? Well, the new season did give us 2 brand new maps, Brinewater Springs and the return of Flounder Heights. I'm not going to discuss these in depth because otherwise this video would get way too long, but what these maps have that most of the other maps in this game do not are actual flank and side routes. The problem here is that Brinewater has only one flank route, so it's predictable, on top of a slew of other problems it has, and Flounder has a whole path out of spawn missing, which makes it more difficult to get back into mid. Most of the routes into mid are still intact though, but limiting where you can leave your spawn hurts this map quite a bit. On the other hand, this map is a breath of fresh air compared to the heaps of compost we've been getting in this game. This is probably me grasping at straws, but the fact that both of the new stages we got have actual flanks makes me hopeful for the direction that maps will be taken in the future. I hope that Nintendo has realized that their special spamming problem comes from the maps and their lack of movement options, and future maps for this game have a variety of paths to take so that players aren't as dependent on using their specials to make plays. I also hope that future maps or map reworks will actually take advantage of the new movement option that Splatoon 3 gives us. Like, what's the point of Squid Surge if there's barely any inkable walls to climb? Maybe they can add routes that require a Squid Surge to go through, like this shortcut through the tutorial section, or places that you can only get to by using wall jumps. Players should be rewarded for knowing the maps well. I am a big fan of Splatoon, and I want each game to be better than the last. I want each game to be the best it can be and provide a fun experience, but these maps just don't cut it. It's just sad to see how the maps get worse and worse with each game that comes out. What do you think about Splatoon 3's map design? Do you agree? Or do you think I'm actually wrong that these are the best maps we've ever seen so far? Do you think Nintendo's gonna fix these maps, and what changes would you like to see? Please let me know in the comments down below. And hey, you've made it to the end of the video, so you probably like Splatoon. If you enjoyed what you just saw and you want to see more, then please consider pressing the like and subscribe buttons. I'll see you all next time.